The difficulty when it comes to insurance is that sometimes in order to save a few dollars, consumers make a costly mistake in purchasing insurance by assuming or falling prey to common myths about insurance. Now, interestingly enough, if you're in many provinces and you purchase auto insurance, it is a commodity to some degree because it's mandated by law. If you own a vehicle, you have to get a license. To get a license, you have to have insurance. The insurance policy, maybe ask this question, how many of you have actually seen an automobile insurance policy recently, the wordings? When you get your renewal, do you get all the wordings? Usually you just get a declaration page, just telling you what your coverages are and what the amounts are, but no actual policy wordings. There's a reason for that. Policies are mandated by law. The wordings are approved by each provincial government. They're available online, and they are identical from one insurance company to the next. So the only choices you have are things like, how much liability insurance do I choose? And if I have an older vehicle, do I cover it for collision or not? And there are some endorsements you can add as well. But the basic policy wordings are identical. And that's why you really don't need a policy wording, because it is the same. It is a commodity. With other kinds of insurance, that is not the case. And even though insurance companies may have the same terms, the same amounts, the fact of the matter is those policies can vary widely in content when you start reading the wordings. Okay, so when you're making a decision between one company and next, it is important to at least have some basic knowledge and the kinds of questions that you should ask to an agent or broker to understand what you're actually covered for, instead of running to the filing cabinet, pulling out your policy wording, and hoping it's covered after you've received a lawsuit. Now, the first myth is, again, the myth that all policies are the same. And as I've said, that is not the case. The differences are contained in the fine print, the insuring agreements, the conditions, the exclusions, and the definitions. The second myth is that you only need one kind of liability insurance. And traditionally, businesses and organizations have just carried something called general liability insurance, because in past days, people sued for bodily injuries, slander, or damaging somebody else's property, where you're held responsible and where you're expected to pay for that damage because it was your negligence that caused it. And that is the traditional form of insurance. The reality, though, nowadays is that most nonprofits and charities require more than just one kind of insurance. They oftentimes require certainly directors' and officers' liability. The first case in Canadian courts against a nonprofit or charitable organization board that was successful was only 1987. That's the beginning of the concern about charitable directors being sued. Since that time, there's been a steady stream of both alleged claims and also settled claims and awards in courts. So it is really important for board members to make sure they have directors' and officers' liability in addition to general liability. There are other forms of liability that we'll talk about as well, and it depends on what your ministries and programs are. If you're involved in media, if you're involved in certain kinds of professional services that you provide as a charity, you may also require additional liability coverage.